I'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Peace and safety to the hopefully elect, all the sincere Akim, scattered throughout the four corners, pushing His word in sincerity and in truth. For those who don't know, Yahweh is the name of the Heavenly Father, who the world ignorantly calls God. And Yahweh Shai is the name of the only begotten Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. This is another edition of private interpretation. So this is 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 20. It says, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. And the prophecy that I'm going to go into is dealing with Gog and Magog. And the private interpretation is that it's referring to the Russians, World War III, the War of Armageddon, which Armageddon is a place and not an event. We showed you that through previous lessons. So it reads, verse 21, for the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man. And that doctrine about Gog and Magog being the Russians, it came in by the will of man, and it's not biblical. It says, but holy men of the power spake, and the holy man that we're going to go into is two of the men of the Lord, which is John the Revelator and the prophet Ezekiel. All right, and those will be the men, the holy men of the power spake as they was moved by the Holy Spirit. So the first precept I want to get is in the book of Revelations, chapter 20 and verse 7. This is Revelation chapter 20 and 7, and it reads, and when the 1,000 years were expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Now, the spiritual, the angelic demon Satan, all right, this is not referring to the angel Satan. This is referring to man, and I'm going to show you. Let me get a precept here in Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 9 to show you what that Satan is referring to. So it says, even him who's coming is after the workings of Satan. All right, so that's what it's referring to in Revelations, with all power and signs and lying wonders. All right, so going back to the book of Revelation, chapter 20, and I'm going to get another precept in verse 1. It says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, and he laid on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So that's what it's referring to in verse 7 when it talks about Satan, all right, being loosed out of his being loose. So let's jump back down to verse 7, and it says, and when the 1,000 years were expired, Satan shall be loose out of his prison. Now we know, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 9, it's referring to man that come after the workings of Satan. And when you read up in the chapter, verse 1 and verse 2, it shows you that Satan, that old serpent, which is the devil, all right, which the word devil means deceiver, all right, referring to man. So reading on verse 8, it says, and shall go out to deceive the nations, all right, referring to Satan, that old serpent, which is the devil. And I'm going to show you that that's referring to the Edomites, all right, the so-called white men. For those who don't know who the Edomites are, that's the so-called Caucasian race, all right. The biblical name is the Edomites. So it says, and shall go out to deceive the nations, all right, referring to that beast, all right, referring to Babylon, which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. Now that's what I want to deal with in this edition of private interpretations, this Gog and Magog. Like I said in the beginning, The private interpretation is that Gog and Magog is referring to the Russians, which the Russians are Edomites, all right? So Gog and Magog is not referring to the Russians, all right? And I'm going to show you that. So let's look up this word Gog. And as you can see here, it says mountain. And we know mountain is referred to governments, all right, in the scriptures, all right? That's why it's called Mount Zion and Mount Esau, all right? So the mountain, okay, it says a symbolic name for a future Antichrist, all right? So meaning a government, an Antichrist, a government that's Antichrist, that's anti-Yahushua, all right, which is all these other heathen government nations, all right? So that's who Gog is referring to. So now let's look up Magog. And as you can see on your screen, it says overtopping, covering. Here it says foreign nation, all right? Foreign government, okay? Remember, mountain is referring to governments, all right? Foreign government that is figuratively an anti-Christian party, all right? An anti-Christian party, all right? So, a government, man, a mountain, okay? A foreign nation, all right? And that's referring to all these nations, all right? Moab, Elam, Ham, all right? All these other nations that spoke of in the book of Psalms, chapter, I believe 83 or 82, all right? All these nations that's confederate, all right, against Israel, against the Lord's elect. So now when you look up this root word, it says land of Gog. It says here in the Strong's Magog. All right, so that's in the Hebrew what Magog is referring to, the land of God. And here in the Greek, it says a foreign nation, all right, a foreign nation, a foreign government that is figuratively an anti-Christian party, all right, an anti-Yahushua government, an antichrist, all right. So since they call it in Christianity an antichrist government, all right. Now let's take another look at this word Gog again. As you can see on your screen, it says mountain, all right. And when you look at the origin of this word, all right, in the Hebrew, it also goes back to mountain, okay. Now here in the Greek, it says a symbolic name for some future antichrist, all right, that anti-Christian party, all right, that foreign nation, meaning that those governments, those antichrist governments, all right, those foreign governments. So that's what Gog and Magog is referring to. So reading on, it says to gather them, referring to the nations, and I'm going to show you that through the precepts, because the prophet Ezekiel, all right, spoke of the same vision, man. So it says to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. And they, referring to the nations, all right, those foreign nations, those mountains, those governments, all right, those anti-Christ governments, man, referring to the nations. So, reading on, it says, and they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And I'm going to show you through the precepts what that's referring to also. And fire came down from the power out of heaven and devoured them all. Now, I want to get a precept in the book of Ezekiel. Get a precept here in the book of Ezekiel and show you that the prophet Ezekiel had the same vision that John the Revelator received. So Ezekiel chapter 38, and I want to read this whole chapter so I can give you the full understanding of Gog and Magog. Alright? So it says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog and the land of Magog, chief prince of my chief Antibal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord power, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of my chief Antibal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thy army, horses, horsemen, and all them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company. Alright, that great company, remember, going back to the book of Revelations, when you look up the word Magog, it says a foreign nation, an anti-Christian party. Okay, an anti-Christian party. Alright, so going back to the book of Ezekiel chapter 38, and I believe verse 4, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaw, and I will bring thee forth, and all thy armies, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in all sorts of armor, even a great company. Alright, that party, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, with them. And this is those anti-Christian parties, man. Alright, those mountains, those governments, alright, those heathen governments. It says, all of them with shields and helmet, Gomer and all his bands. Alright, that party, the house of Tugamar and of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Alright, that's that anti-Christian party. Alright, Gog and Magog. So it says, be thou prepared, be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company. Alright, that party, that anti-Christian party, foreign nations, alright, foreign governments that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, referring to the elect of Israel. Alright, when you read the book of Luke chapter 17, that's where those people are going to be taken. Alright, to the land of Israel. Okay, so this is what this is referring to. So read on, it says, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel. Alright, against the what? Governments of Israel. Okay, which have been always waste, referring to the elect, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. Alright, referring to Luke 17. Alright, those that was taken. Alright, remember the apostles asked the Lord where they're going to be taken, and the Lord answered the apostles and said, wherever the carcasses be, that's where the birds is going to be gathered. And we know that this is going to take place in the land of Israel. Alright, and I'm going to show you that further through this lesson. So it says, verse 9, thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands. Alright, those anti-Christian parties. Alright, and many people with thee. Thus saith the Lord power, it shall also come to pass that at that time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. Remember, Satan, alright, is going to deceive Gog and Magog, referring to the nations, all right, to come up against Israel. All right, reading on. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of the unwalled villages. All right, and that's them compassing the camp of the saints. All right, I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thy hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle good, that dwell in the midst of the land. And how those people going to be gathered? Luke 17. All right, remember the Lord referred to the two women working, and one being taken and the other one being left. All right, and that's how they're going to be gathered, and that's what that's referring to. Sheba and Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, with all their young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, thou art come to take a spoil, has thou gathered thy company to take a prey. All right, them foreign nations. All right, that anti-Christian party. All right, that's the company to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle goods, to take a great spoil. Therefore, son of man, prophesying, saying to Gog, all right, those mountains, those foreign nations, all right, those foreign governments. Okay, so reading on, it says, thus saith the Lord power, in that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, not all Israel, all right, the elect, all right, shall thou not know it, and thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, that party, all right, all of them riding upon horses, a great company, and a mighty army. And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land. It shall be in the latter days. And I will bring thee against the land, that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in thee, O God, before their eyes. All right. Verse 17. Thus saith the Lord power, thou art he of whom I have spoken in old times by the servants, the prophets of Israel, which prophesy in the days of many years, that I will bring thee against them. And it shall come to pass at that time, when Gog, referring to the nations, all right, shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord power, that my fury shall come up in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, where those in Luke 17 is going to be taken. All right? So that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field and all creepy things that creep upon the earth and all men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. And I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains. And him is referring to God, the nations, all right, those foreign nations, those foreign governments, saith the Lord power. Every man's sword shall be against his brother, and I will plead against him with pestilence, not with nuclear missiles, all right, with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands, all right, that anti-Christian party, all right, those foreign governments, upon his bands and upon the many people that are with him, and overflowing rain and great hailstone, fire and brimstone. Thus will I magnify myself, just like the Lord magnified himself during the time of Pharaoh when he took down Egypt. And you can read about that in the book of Romans chapter 9. All right, so it says, in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am Yahweh. Okay, so this is what it's referring to in the book of Revelations when it refers to Gog and Magog. Now let's go back and prove that point further. So this is the book of Revelation chapter 20 and verse 9. And it says, and they went up on the breadth of the earth, referring to Gog and Magog, compass the camps of the saints. All right, and we just read about that in the book of Ezekiel, in the land of Israel, and the beloved city. And fire came down from heaven, all right, and that's the Lord pleading with them with pestilence, all right, and fire came down from the power out of heaven and devoured them. The them is referring to those nations, Gog and Magog, all right, mountain, all right, those foreign governments, okay, a symbolic name for some future Antichrist, all right. Now, when you look up Magog, it says a foreign nation, all right, those foreign governments. That is an anti-Christian party, all right? And that's your company, that's your bands, all right? So now, reading on, it says, and went up on the breadth of the earth to compass the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from the power out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them, all right, this is an important point. And the devil that deceived them, that deceived what? Gog and Magog, all right, those foreign nations, all right, those anti-Christian governments, all right, and the devil that deceived them. Remember, when you read verse 1, Salakia verse 2, Revelation 20 and 2, it tells you, and he laid hold on the dragon. We know that's referring to the Edomites, that old serpent. We know that old serpent referring to a crafty man, which is the devil, all right, referring to a man, and Satan. And like we read in 2 Thessalonians 2 and 9, him who comes after the workings of Satan, all right, so that's who it's referring to. So now when you jump back to verse 10, and it says, and the devil that deceiveth them was cast into the lake of fire. And we know that lake is a body, and that fire is judgment, all right? So the deceiver, all right, which is a man, all right, which is not Satan, all right, the spiritual angel Satan, all right? So the devil that deceived them is going to be thrown into the lake, all right? And who's the devil? The Edomites, all right? The so-called white man, the Caucasians. That's the devil. That's the dragon, all right? So it says, and the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake, all right? That lake, we know that the waters is metaphorically and parabolically, literally referring to people, all right? So that's that lake of judgment, the people of judgment, all right? So that devil, the so-called white man, is going to be judged, all right? So it says, and brimstone, and we know the brimstone is referring to the volcanoes, all right? This is not referring to nuclear missiles, all right? That's another private interpretation that was brought in by the will of man, all right? That lake of fire is that judgment, all right? The lake goes back to a body of water, and we know according to, let's get it here, I believe it's Revelation 17 and 15, to prove that that lake is a body of people, a multitude of people that's going to be judged. All right, so it says, Revelation 17:15, and he saith unto me, the waters, and the lake is a body of water, all right, which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are people and multitudes and nations and tongues. All right. So going back to Revelation 20 and 10, and it says, where the beast and the false prophet are. So this is not referring to Satan being loose. All right, that's Satan in verse when it talks about Satan deceiving the nations, being loose to deceive the nations. All right, that's referring to the Edomites deceiving those foreign nations to come up against Israel. All right, and it says, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. All right, so that's what it's referring to. So now let's go get one last precept. Go back to the prophet Ezekiel chapter 39 and verse 11. This is Ezekiel chapter 39 and 11, and it reads, and it shall come to pass that in that day that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves. All right, so this is not referring to the Russians. All right, remember, Russians are Edomites. All right, Gog is those foreign nations, those foreign governments. All right, those anti-Christian, all right, governments. All right, that's going to be deceived by the so-called white man to come up against Israel, man. All right. So it says, and it shall come to pass. Let's see here. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will give Gog a place there of graves in Israel. All right. So this is where this all is going to take place at, in Israel. This is not referring to World War III. That's a private interpretation. It's not biblical. All right. It's doctrines of devils. All right. And you have guys amongst the circumcision bringing that madness in the temple, pushing it as the Lord's word. So it says that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves in Israel, the valley of passengers on the east of the sea, and it shall stop the noses of the passengers. And that goes back to Luke chapter 17 and Matthew chapter 24 when it talks about those carcasses. Well, the carcasses that's where the eagle's going to be gathered. All right. So it says, and it shall stop the noses of the passengers, and there shall they bury Gog. Gog referring to what? Those multitude, that those foreign governments. All right, that's going to come up against Israel. All right, those who are taken in Luke 17, and all his multitude. All right, bands. All right, that anti-Christian party. All right, and all his multitude that we read about in verse 38, and they shall call it the valley of Magog. Now I want to look up this word Magog. As you can see, it says multitude of Gog, meaning multitude of governments. All right, we know Gog means mountain. All right, which is referred to governments. The multitude of Gog, meaning that party, all right, that company, those bands, okay, the multitude of governments, okay, that's what it's referring to. Let's see here, Gog mountain. Let's look up this. It says the multitude of Gog, meaning what? The multitude of governments that's going to be deceived by the Edomites to come up against Israel. So it says, in 7 months shall the house of Israel be burying of them those carcasses, those bodies that spoke of in the New Testament, that they may be cleansed, that they may cleanse the land. Remember, going back to the book of Genesis and also the book of Exodus, the blood of him that shedded the blood is how the land is going to be cleansed. And that's the edification of Gog and Magog. All right, it's not referring to the Russians shooting nuclear missiles on America. All right, that's not biblical. It's doctrines of devils, and it's a private interpretation that was brought in by the will of man. I hope you brothers was edified, and with that, I'm gonna say shalom.